The way we eat and the way we live are not always seen as connected, but how we eat is unarguably related to the fate of the planet in climate terms. But the connection goes further to the social order in which we live and the survival of democracy itself. My name is John Torpey, and I'm director of the Ralph Bunche Institute at the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. And we're fortunate to have with us this evening Frances Moore Lappé, the author of Diet for a Small Planet, which has sold millions of copies and recently marked its 50th anniversary. She has received numerous honorary doctorates and awards for her work, including the Right Livelihood Award, which is sometimes known as the Alternative Nobel Prize. With her daughter, Anna, she established in Cambridge, Massachusetts in 2002, the Small Planet Institute, which focuses on the promotion of democracy. She has written some 20 books on food, climate, and democracy, including World Hunger 10 Myths, which she wrote with Joseph Collins, and more recently, Daring Democracy, Igniting Power, Meaning, and Connection for the America We Want, which was co-authored with Adam Eichen and published by Beacon Press in 2017. Thanks so much for joining us this evening, Frances Moore Lappé.
Thank you so much, John.
Great to have you with us. And before we begin, I want to note that this event is part of the Graduate Center's Promise and Perils of Democracy series, which is funded by the Carnegie Corporation of New York. So I want to go back to something I started with in the introduction, and that is, of course, the fact that you wrote and published the book Diet for a Small Planet some 50 years ago. And I said, we don't necessarily always think about the relationship between how we eat and how we live, but I think there's more of that kind of thinking going on in recent years, but you were sort of ahead of the pack. And how would you describe the ways our eating habits and ideas about food have changed during this intervening time?
Wow, it is huge. It is huge. I have to say that the irony of my life, one of them, is that I grew up in Cowtown. That's the nickname for Fort Worth, Texas. So I would have been the last person maybe to question the meat center diet. But what has changed is enormous. That when I started my work, the idea was that you couldn't live without meat, and that we couldn't get enough protein without meat, and therefore we were, that was it. And so what we now know is that, in fact, that vegetable protein can supply all our protein needs, plus our other nutritional needs, and actually serve our health. Because what has happened is there's been this epidemic of diabetes in our society. There has been a problem. There is a problem of obesity, a very serious one that interferes with our health as well. And a plant-centered diet, it turns out, can help with all of these problems. And it's really become understood in a way that didn't register before, that a plant-centered diet could actually lower the risk of heart disease and boosts the system against cancer, and more than that. So that is a huge shift. And I think another thing that has changed so much is the appreciation in the bigger picture of how a meat-centered diet actually was leading to ecological destruction. And we didn't appreciate that when I began at all. And now we know that rainforest destruction, biodiversity loss is directly connected to this meat-centered diet. And one fact that I think is so shocking is that 80% of our land still is devoted to livestock production, but it supplies only 18% of our calories. But this kind of awareness is really still pretty new. But yet there is this increase, a great increase in the sales of plant, can make plant-centered diet. That those sales have been growing at a pace much faster than overall grocery sales. So that's been changing. So we're at a time of great awakening about the danger of a meat-centered diet on many levels, and what a plant-centered diet offers us personally and the world. It's huge.
Well, maybe you could tell us a little bit about, the irony in this. I mean, what got you interested? Was it growing up in Cowtown? Was that something that kind of made an impact? And, you sort of wondered about why are we eating all this stuff? Or how did you get into this issue?
No, it was one thing. It was Paul Ehrlich's book, The Population Bomb. And that was a period, this was the late 60s, early 70s. And we were told really that we had overrun the Earth's capacity to feed us. And I still remember this cartoon of just people falling off the earth because there was no more room left and we couldn't possibly support people. And so I thought, oh, is that really true? Because I was kind of lost. I worked in the war on poverty and I was so intent on eradicating poverty, but then I felt, well, I have to go to the root. Why is there? What is the underlying causes? And I thought, oh, food would help me figure that out. So I started focusing on it, but the frame, the mental map was scarcity. There's not enough. And so I hit the books at the UC Berkeley Library with my dad's slide rule. I put 2 and 2 together, kind of literally, and discovered, oh, no, there's more than enough. And I was so excited that we had enough food to feed everyone, because I had friends who said they couldn't possibly have children because there was not enough to go around. And so that became my mission to say, wait a minute, hunger is created by we human people. It's not a lack of the earth. It's how we use these wonderful resources. And I wanted to just shout it out. So I started a 1-page handout and it eventually became a book. And I want all you students to understand, any students listening, I made a C on my first English paper in college. So if you're not doing great on your paper writing yet, don't give up, because I've just done now 20 books. So that didn't stop me. But my point is that I found my question, John. That was the key. And so that's another little piece of advice for anyone, just find a question that you've just got to answer. And for me, it was, why is there hunger in the world? And that then led to one thing, to the next thing, to the next thing. As you know, John, it led very directly to what is democracy.
Right. Well, that was exactly where I was going. I mean, somewhere here in the end was not exactly about food. It was really about democracy and
Right.
living in a democratic system. So maybe you could talk about how you got from food to democracy.
Yeah, that my little punchline was, hunger is not caused by a scarcity of food. It's caused by a scarcity of democracy. And it's really quite a simple concept, democracy. It's that we each have a voice that can be heard for how we together use our commons. And so I really understood that was the key idea, that no one chooses to go hungry. So to the degree that we have hunger and we have diseases caused by hunger, then we don't have democracy, because clearly no one would choose that, right? It was pretty simple in my head. And so I began then to really focus on, so I walk with these 2 feet now, one on the food piece, because it is so central to our health and everybody's interested in food, and then go to the democracy piece from there. And what's become so clear to me is that we have allowed private corporate interests to so influence our political decision making that we now have a couple of I think it's 20 lobbyists in Washington for every person that we've elected to represent us there, and that the last election was twice the cost of the previous one, the 2020 election. That so much money involved, and so that corporate interest can then continue to feed us a diet that is really, really unhealthy, this ultra-processed diet. So that's the other thing that has changed. Yes, there's much more interested in plant-based eating, and the purchasing has gone way up on that. And at the same time, this opposite force of more and more processed food that is literally killing us. That food that I was just looking at the figures that on soda consumption, for example, that some of the poorest countries of the world, like Mexico, is one of the leaders in drinking soft drinks, because you can get some that quick sugar hit in with very little money. but it's really undermining our well-being. And here in the US, there's just this incredible consumption of 58% of our calories now come from ultra-processed foods. So it's this both and that we're waking up on the one hand, and yet because we are back to democracy, because we allow our democracy to be undermined by private corporate interests, that our health is being really, really damaged by a food system driven by what will make that quick sale and what is most advertised, which is the processed food. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. I mean, along the way, you developed the idea of living democracy. And I'm curious what you would say about that. In part, I was listening to NPR yesterday and hearing a rather old interview with Jimmy Carter, who, as we know, is facing the end of his life. But he wrote a book called Living Faith, which has an ambiguous kind of character to the title, but it's a very evocative and encouraging one. So I'm sort of curious, what you mean by living democracy.
Well, living democracy means to me, that democracy is a way of life. It's not just a structure of government that, I deal with once, whenever I vote sort of thing. It is a way of living together. And it is a culture in which we understand the deepest human needs are, and I feel very strongly about this, that we all have a need for three things. We need to feel that we have a voice that is power. We need meaning in our lives, and we need to feel connected with others. And only a democracy in which we feel that we together are making decisions about our future, our children's future, and that we can participate in many different ways in that common practice of democracy. So it is a way of life that respects and works to fulfill those three most essential human needs for power, meaning, and connection. And I'm convinced that a governing system that is controlled by private corporate interests that have only the profit motive can't fulfill those three needs. So it's really getting away from the idea that democracy is just a dull duty, and celebrating democracy as a way of life that is so vitalizing. And we make connections with others, and we learn to discuss with people that may not agree with us. All of those things create a vibrant culture of democracy. And that's what I mean by that. It's not something we have, it's something we do. Living democracy is not just a static thing we inherit, but something we co-create in every generation.
Right. And I mean, it reminds me of, again, somebody also influential in these discussions named Alexis de Tocqueville, who wrote in Democracy in America about what he called the habits of the heart. So he was talking about this orientation towards a democratic way of life as a kind of, deeply not even felt in a way. It's a kind of intrinsic sensibility or something like that. And, Robert Bellah once wrote a book with that title, sort of discussing this. And so, I mean, it sounds like, that's kind of what you're getting at as well. It's not, as you say, a thing we do. It's a way we are. And that seems like a really, I mean, would you talk about, the importance of certain kinds of American values in some of your writing, and, not everybody is always so thrilled about what they call American values. And I wonder, which values exactly you're talking about.
Well, certainly I'm talking about this sense of co-responsibility. And I think one of the big, big barriers for Americans, Sean, is that we inherit this idea that we're exceptional and we're the best. And actually, the biggest thing in my life right now is that in my work life is that I'm realizing that we are lacking. We are way behind so many other countries. I was just in Japan for 2 weeks. I just got back, and Japan ranks much higher than we do on the scores of the vitality of our political and economic rights by an organization called Freedom House. It was founded in 1941 by Eleanor Roosevelt and others. And we ranked down at like 62 or something like that. It's really, 62. whereas Japan is right behind the Nordics, which are very much at the top. And to be in a country where I didn't see any homelessness, I didn't see any beggars. I just felt very, very safe. Their homicide rate is some tiny fraction of ours. And that's only one example, that there's so many countries that are doing much better on their healthcare system, their education system, criminal justice, as I've mentioned, and food. And so I think that's really a big shift for all of us to realize that, oh, maybe we can learn. And instead of being depressed by that, being happy that we're not the best, because if we were the best, that would be pretty sad, knowing what we know about, the poverty in this country and ecological destruction. So I'm just really delighted to be learning about how other countries are progressing and learning from them. And that's really essential for us to get out of that frame that somehow, that we figured it out and others haven't, when actually we can learn so much from others.
Right. I mean, indeed, we've, recently been on the brink of, what could have been a kind of an authoritarian transformation of the country. Now, how close you think that was might be a matter of debate, but what happened on January 6th, 2021 was unprecedented, or at least nothing like it has happened in a very long time in the United States. And as you know, there's a great concern about sort of authoritarian movements and governments around the world. And, I wonder what you would say about what's going on in those other circumstances, and how worried are you about, the direction we've been on in the United States ourselves?
Well, I'm very worried. As you know, as we said, democracy is in decline. I just read the statistic that less than 10% of us live in working democracies. And that is why this conversation we're having tonight and the work your students are doing is so vital to help people understand that to solve any of the challenges today of global climate change and poverty and species extinction, all of these things that are life and death for our planet, require us to step up and to become an exemplar, a positive one. And that means, pretty basic things, removing the power of wealth that's in our system, as I was just mentioning, and making it much more easy to participate in voting. I'm just really struck by looking at countries that have universal voting, where you're automatically registered, and some of them, the universal voting is a civic duty, and some you're fined if you're not voting. I mean, I think the more that we can engage people and help us all feel that this is not inevitable, this decline that has happened so rapidly in my lifetime, this is not inevitable, and that the countries that are, for example, have public health care, they do so much better than we do on infant mortality, for example. It's so shameful that we rank so low. So I just couldn't stress more that we're in this moment where it's just so clear now that democracy is absolutely essential, and that the more we can learn from others, that is absolutely essential. And so we're creating a report called Tough Truths for Better Tomorrow. And so it shows where we rank on each of these categories, from healthcare to education, et cetera. And then it gives the country that ranks the highest, so we can go and find out, what is really going on in that country. And so it's not to shame us, but it's to motivate us. And, I like to say that, whether it's a rocky marriage or a sprained ankle, you've got to look at it with clear eyes and not shy away. You've got to really deal to heal. We've got to really deal with what is the truth about our country and where we do rank so poorly. Does that answer your question. I kind of was rolling on there. I'm not sure I answered.
Sure. I mean, this notion that we're number one, is rather widespread, if not pervasive. And, I think it does get in the way of people understanding, exactly what kinds of outcomes we achieve in the United States. I mean, healthcare is maybe the most obvious one, where we spend far more than anybody else and have, less good outcomes than they do in France or in the Nordic countries or whatever. So, I think most people just sort of don't know that, and they just hear this stuff about we're number one. And there are many great things about the United States, I would also say that. But, in many ways, we have a long way to go. And of course, the kind of gun death rates that you referred to in regard to your trip to Japan. I mean, the New York Times did a spread a few years ago, I think, about how would you get a gun in a variety of countries. I mean, Japan was one of the hardest by far. It took forever. I mean, you would just give up. I think most people would just give up trying to get a gun if they had to go through all those, all those kinds of controls. Whereas here, depending on what state you're in, it's relatively easy to do. So that's, something we need to look at more closely. I mean, anyway, I have many things to say about this, obviously, but I'm sort of curious, you've written so much about climate change as a concern. And, I wonder how you think we're doing on that. I mean, one might argue that the Biden administration has done a lot recently to, advance the cause of electric vehicles, for example, making those competitive in price with internal combustion engines. But that's just obviously one part of this larger picture, even if a relatively large one. So I wonder how you think we're doing, who's doing something right on those kinds of issues.
Well, I'm delighted that, in the big Biden bill, that there is an emphasis on electric vehicles and supporting all of that, and very, very much. But I have to say that again, until the interest of those polluters aren't influencing through their contributions, through the fossil fuel industry's contributions in our political system, that it's very hard to imagine how we're going to get free. So we have to be stepping up also and demanding from all of our legislators that they support efforts to limit the power of private contributions and lobbying. One figure I remember from Daring Democracy, that this whole lobbying industry, this really began in the 70s, and there was a 14-fold increase over just one decade. So it hasn't always been like this, that the corporate lobbyists are winning at the price of survival of the planet. But I really think that that's the climate change piece perhaps can be the wake-up call for a lot of us, and understanding. And I love it that the diet piece of it, one of the things I love about focusing on food is that we make those choices every single day, right? Multiple times. And to know that you're choosing a plant-centered diet that entails many fewer greenhouse gas emissions and much less rainforest destruction, and overall, less energy, that's a way to say, I can be involved in the solution every single day. And to me, it's like wearing a string around my finger, to remind me of all the ways that I'm connected to the earth and to the planet's health, including climate change. So I just couldn't emphasize more the contribution of both, I sort of walk on two legs, right? The plant-centered diet and what that means to focus on food, and the living democracy, what it means to really get together with others. I think we so need that connection with others in our community, and figure, okay, what is the best way that I can weigh in regularly on engendering a really true democratic dialogue and democratic decision making. And that means fighting against, there have been how many, I've forgotten the number, but so many bills passed in so many states that have restricted voting, that have weakened our voting system. So that I don't think is widely known. And that's the kind of thing that we can be alert for and just fight against from now on.
And I mean, beyond sort of exhortation, I mean, are there specific things you would encourage people to do in order to sort of strengthen our democratic order? I mean, many people, for example, what I have in mind is that many people, like to suggest or do suggest that, we should institute some kind of national service requirement for young people, for 18-year-olds, not unlike what generally happens in Germany, where there's a kind of military service requirement, but most people opt out of it and, do so-called social service. I wonder, what you think of ideas like that, or do you have another one that would get people, off the couch?
Yes, I was just talking about this today with the young people in my office, and they said, "Oh, we really had something like that, this." And of course, in my life, the war on poverty was, in a sense, that. I was paid to go door to door in Philadelphia, working with the poorest people and helping them get what they deserved in our welfare system, and they were being so poorly treated. And so I strongly support that. Getting our, just getting out there and also not feeling so alone because we're working with others. So I think what is key for any of us as individuals to find, just even one other friend who's excited as you are about one piece of this puzzle, and then to find out what groups are operating in your community that you could connect to, so that you don't feel like you're just a lone voice. And finding out, how to talk to other people who may not agree with us. You see, I want to stress that, and I found this true with close friends that I know, that we think of the Reds, I like to call it Reds and Blues because I don't like the right and left thing. But anyway, that the Reds, that they're less caring, they're more narrow-minded, etc. And often I think that what they're experiencing is that they bought the idea that we are this free market economy. And if they're not doing well in it, then they feel shame. And shame leads to blame. That's just sort of the human condition. And so they look for those to blame because they feel so frightened about their own situation. And so I think the more, in terms of what we do, the more we can be compassionate and really listen, and not just, say, "Oh, well, you didn't, you voted for Trump, so therefore, you're a loser. I can't relate to that." But really to listen to what it is that about their lives that is so limiting, and encourage them to see the system causes to reduce some of the sense of shame. That I think that could really be helpful. Do you agree with that, John?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, but you've now mentioned twice in this, 45 minutes, or not even 45 minutes, you've mentioned your activity in the war on poverty. And I'm sort of curious. I mean, I don't know that I know anybody else who, worked and thinks of themselves, very self-consciously as having worked in the war on poverty. And it clearly was sort of your launching pad, it seems. And so the government, what happened? The government paid people to go knock on the doors of poor people and do what?
No, I was paid by the city of Philadelphia with money from the Office of Economic Opportunity. Do you remember that? There was an Office of Economic Opportunity. And I was paid, yes, by the city to go door to door in Germantown in Philadelphia, and to talk to people, women, almost all women, they were all women who were dependent upon welfare, and they were being treated very badly and just shamefully by the welfare department. They're just an insult to anyone's dignity is the way they were being treated. And we developed a group called the Germantown Welfare Rights Organization. I don't know if you remember Welfare Rights Organization.
I do.
But it's a national organization. So that was the spirit of it was dignity. It was, yes, I'm in this really difficult situation. I have these children that I can't, I've got to feed my kids and I can't, I need help. And they were treated so badly. And we together, though, they felt a sense of dignity. And through this, we were able to get, for example, fair hearings so that people couldn't just be kicked off welfare without anybody looking into what was going on. So it was life-changing, absolutely life-changing. The woman I worked most closely with that I loved, absolutely dear, Lily, died of a heart attack in her early 40s. She was one of the most affected people in the group. And I was convinced that Lily didn't die of a heart attack, that she died of poverty, that I needed to do something about. And so I felt I had to go deeper. And that's what then led to Diet for a Small Planet. I felt, oh, I have to understand, why did Lily die? And to go into the root causes. And that took me all the way then to democracy.
It's fascinating. And I want to encourage the audience, by the way, to, enter questions into the Q&A that we can get to in a few minutes. But I guess I want to follow up on this and pursue this a bit more and ask you, there is a feeling of a certain kind of change in the country, it seems to me, that, unions are more popular than they've been in quite a while. But Biden is proposing certain kinds of policies like an expanded child tax credit or subsidized child care and things like that, would make life easier for the kinds of people that you were talking to when you were working in the war on poverty. And I sort of wonder, do you think something like, at one level, that idea seems, very remote from us, but on the other hand, it had positive consequences, and you sort of ask yourself, could people conceive of a thing like this? Because I do think there's this sense of disconnection among people and alienation and polarization that, the kind of military service or some equivalent of national service would in fact help to address. So, can you imagine such a thing happening today?
Yes, I'm so glad that you brought this up, because when you say it, I completely agree. And for me, it was a sense of national service kind of effect, right? And it was life-changing in a good way. So I'm going to put that high on my list of things that I want to explore, and explore what were the lessons learned, what other countries are doing anything like this, because it was an incomparable, to be as a whatever I was just out of college and to have such responsibility was a sort of part of it, that I was trusted to go out and use my own judgment about how to approach people. And in that sense, it helped me grow up, And so I'm really going to follow up on that. And I want to see because the work I've been doing, looking at other countries, it's been very much looking at how are they doing, on the results of healthcare, et cetera, and education. But I want to see what's an example of this approach, because it absolutely seems so essential right now more than ever.
Yes. And do you sense what I'm talking about in the country, or do things seem less open and promising? I guess I have a sense that, to some degree, we're turning away from the kind of polarization and, enmity that has riven the country, and that one of our recent past presidents was particularly, good and effective at cultivating. And it seemed in many ways the real foundation of his political life. I wonder how you see us, moving away from that, or whether you do.
Well, I love it that you're saying this. I just looked over at notes I prepared, and one of them was that interpersonal trust has fallen. Only 1/3 of us believe others can be trusted. So that is frightening, because how can democracy exist under that? I'm, just really taken by what you're saying. And fortunately, because of my own children, I'm in touch with, younger generation, and that I feel more willingness to experiment and to not think of the old categories in the young people that I'm in touch with, and not this kind of rancor or blaming. But I do find that so interesting that because of now the disinformation that we know is so damaging and that has hurt our own society, and I'd like to get to the roots of why this general interpersonal trust has fallen, but anything that we can do to reestablish that, to be in real conversation with others from a different perspective, I think that's a high priority. And I think starting with young people, reaching out to those who are most suffering under our current highly concentrated corporate system is one pathway, to learn to listen and to learn to identify with people with a different life experience.
So now I'm curious. I mean, I have a couple of young kids of my own, but I'm curious what you're seeing, in young people that, gives you hope, gives you a sense of enthusiasm and optimism. What are you getting from them that we should know about?
Well, the first word that comes to mind is courage. That is the quality to cultivate. I love to quote Eleanor Roosevelt, who said, "Do something every day that scares you." That I see young people, and it's not just Greta over there, that young people trying things that they've never tried before. The young people who come into our office really putting themselves into a new environment, and which could be embarrassing if they don't make it, so to speak. So I think that that is the most encouraging thing, of seeing them willing to take risks, whether it's in a demonstration or a writing or just joining groups where they can learn more. I find that very encouraging, and I just couldn't stress more this virtue of courage, of doing what we thought we could not do. That is the only way I think that we can grow, and there will be failures, but that I think is absolutely the key, is doing what we thought we could not do, and living with the consequences. And so that's the courage part of democracy.
Interesting. So I see some things on the wall behind you that may come from your Small Planet Institute, and turning to the questions, somebody has asked, what exactly is the Small Planet Institute doing? And what can you tell us about it? What is it doing to promote democracy and sustainability?
Well, one of the books up there is called Daring Democracy. I wrote with a young man, 49 years my junior, and we're very close friends. And it is our effort to identify. We tell stories of where society, where states and localities are moving forward and taking risks. And this courageous, that we tell the story of Katie Fahey in Michigan, who was in her 20s and said, "Oh, I don't like gerrymandering, the carving out of districts so that your party wins. I'm going to do something." She put one notice on Facebook or some other social media, and that led to a statewide campaign where she and her friends went town to town to town and had library meetings and collected so many signatures. I don't know how many thousands of signatures they had to collect to get on the ballot, and they did. And they won. These young people led this, and they won. And that meant that in Michigan then, that lines could not be gerrymandered because there was an independent, nonpartisan group that had to sign off on any change in the district lines. And so I think this telling stories of possibility, I call it, or, Chloe Maxman, she graduated from college and went back to Maine. She wanted to live in Maine and in a small town, and she said, well, what can I do in that town? And then she said, oh, maybe I could run for office. And that was a few years ago. And now Chloe has been elected once and then twice, and she's moved from the House to the Senate in Maine and was a leader on climate legislation, labor legislation. And she was just in her 20s when she was elected. So I think that kind of, when I say doing what we thought we could not do, that is really critical part of it. And I just was learning about that just news came today about 2 towns that have instituted ranked choice voting that I think really encourages people to vote and feels much more participatory when you can choose your favorite candidate and make a statement without fear of that you're going to have a vote that doesn't count. And so ranked choice voting is spreading. It already exists in Maine, and I think it helped Chloe. So, and by the way, getting money out, Maine is a beautiful example. If any of you are interested in inspiration about money out of politics, that they passed public financing of elections a number of years ago. And so that has really been a key part of their success as well. And I want to mention one other innovation in Seattle. Check it out. They have a system there of democracy vouchers, so that you get, as a voter, you get 4 vouchers of $25 that you can then give to candidates of your choice. And that brought more diversity into the funding. And people felt more like they were participating. So I think, for me anyway, if I know somebody else has tried it, yes, it takes courage for me, but it's less courage if I know somebody else has done it. And that's who we are. We model ourselves on each other. So look for those heroes, those who are breaking into more democratic practices.
Right. So we have another question that's really in your wheelhouse. And the question basically is, what can the government do to get people to eat better?
What can the government
do to get people to eat better or more healthy?
Oh, well, the key is that we have the power of private industry to push their processed food, this ultra processed food that now makes up 58% of our calories. So we definitely need a Department of Agriculture that is working to make whole foods affordable, and to limit the power of corporate mega corporations, shall we say, that are just getting rich on the junk food, in a word, junk food. So that I think is so important, that I think there could be simply rules about how one, there's a support to go to fresh food that is more expensive, and to put it in the supermarkets where people can see it. So it's not just the junk food they see. So there are a lot of innovations that can be made if we as citizens speak up, because this is a crisis of crises. This health crisis caused by the junk food that is what so many are consuming today, and is now going throughout the world. So it's not just for us. These same corporations. I was walking in southern India, and with tremendous hunger there, and the trees were painted with Pepsi signs. So they're advertising this junk food to people who just, that's the last thing they need. And a doctor told me, yes, I used to be concerned about people's lack of calories. Now people are coming to me with diabetes. So it's not just for our country that we've got to stand up and hold corporate America accountable. It's for their actions in the rest of the world as well. So we just have to have rules that place a health and public interest boundaries around what especially corporate food companies can do, because that's life-threatening at this point.
Right. So the next question comes from an old friend of the Ralph Bunche Institute, Hristo Voinov, and he greets you and me and reminds us that it's International Women's Day. But the question is basically that plant-based diets and similar kinds of solutions are, well-founded in science, but he's arguing that a large part of the global population is misled about these things or is subject to, conspiracy theories and this sort of thing.
I'm sorry, I didn't get the exact word. Is what?
Is subject to sort of conspiracy theories. And, basically the question is, how do you overcome the skepticism that some people may have about the kinds of diets that you're urging us to move to?
Honestly, I don't think skepticism is the problem. I think it is access. And when we think about the traditional diets of that animal food has been, a minor piece of it. And you think of Italian cuisine and Latin cuisine that often, you think of beans and rice, for example, that is a combo that is ancient, and so I don't think it's I think it's access. It's not that, and the somehow maybe also the idea that, well, these plant-based diets are good for you, but they can't possibly be tasty, and to really share the joys of all the different varieties. And at least in my life, I have to tell you that once I moved away from a meat-centered diet, I discovered, oh my God, that's where all the delight is in food, because of all the varieties of fruits and vegetables and all the different spices one can use with them and all the different cuisines you can draw from. So I think we just need to fight that misunderstanding. It's not sacrifice.
Right. So, I mean, your point about access prompts a question from me, which is, basically, do we know, is there a kind of good mapping of what I guess are still known as food deserts? I mean, I live in a house that I bought, many years ago now, that I bought in part because there was a grocery store around the corner. And that was very convenient for me. I mean, it wasn't a great grocery store, so I didn't actually buy a lot of stuff there, but it was convenient for certain things. But for a lot of people, it was the only grocery store they really have access to. And, again, the quality wasn't so great, but nonetheless, there was a grocery store there. And now, for the last 7 years, there's been no grocery store. It hasn't, it closed down and has not been reopened. And, I wonder, I mean, what do we know exactly about the accessibility in the sort of immediate sense of access to stores that sell the kinds of things that you're encouraging us to eat?
Right. And now the big debate, right, is about the new attempted merger of these huge Albertsons. And anyway, there's a merger that is really frightening of two of the biggest in the food system. And so the answer, one piece of the answer, is to recognize that antitrust has a long tradition in our society at different moments, understanding that antitrust, which just means making sure that competition is protected and that there aren't these big conglomerates that can just jack up the prices and also just have stores where the richest people live. That means, again, back to democracy, back to the economic dimension of democracy, and that we have set rules in the past against this kind of monopoly power, and then we've just backtracked and not prevented it. So there's no quick answer. I wouldn't pretend to say that, but clearly naming it as against strong traditions in various times in our history, understanding that we had to keep the market diversified and we had to set rules, it was not only undemocratic, but immoral, because people are dying as a result. So I just always come back to that we, that we have set rules, and believe that this free market requires rules if it is to serve us. It doesn't work on its own. And I think that is the giant myth, that a market left to itself, it concentrates. That's what it does. Wealth moves to the top. So that's got to be the premise, that it's of course understood that we have to fight that actively, and
Right.
making sure that there's always competition.
Right. So here we go back to Diet for a Small Planet. I mean, to some degree, you've addressed this, but the questioner has a personal interest in the origins of Diet for a Small Planet. He says, I've been a vegetarian since my pre-teens, when I didn't know about vegetarianism for sure. And when I was young, it was one of the only vegetarian cookbooks around. My mom, a real carnivore, learned how to cook vegetarian food from it, and I credit that with having put me on the road to a healthy life. A truly visionary work, so I'm really interested in how it came about.
Well, part of it, I have to say, was really good luck. But as I was saying earlier, it started out with a one-page handout. I never thought of myself as a writer, but I just had to tell the world that there was enough food, we can end hunger. And that's good news, that we are creating it, so we can end it. And then the good luck was that I just happened to know someone who happened to know the founder of paperback publishing in America. Betty Ballantyne was her name. She passed away a few years ago, but not before I got to thank her. And I went to see her and I said, Betty, she was the founder of Ballantyne Books. And I said, Betty, what made you take a chance on me? And she looked at me straight in the eyes with a huge smile. She said, well, it was your idea. She said, I figured if you couldn't write it, I could do that. So that was what publishing was then. But let's just say that I was extremely fortunate that I had that opportunity. I mentioned earlier that I made a C on my first English paper in college, so I wasn't particularly lined up to think I was going to become a writer. But the point is that if I think the lesson for all of us, if we do, I get kind of teary saying it, we really do follow our question, find our question, and feel passionate about it, and just feel like we've got to figure this out, and that doors can open, that energy. And the next question can lead to the next question. So I really encourage you to take that frame, that, that finding what really lights your fire, and just keep on until you can see that critical way that you could make some difference there, and that will lead to the next one. So I think that's my major advice, that we don't have to have it all figured out, but if we can see a way we can make one change, that will lead to a new question and to the next, and to find a buddy too. I think I had buddies there in Berkeley who are cheering us on. So even if you only have one friend who's eager to make some big steps, and each of you together say, okay, I pledge I'm going to do this tomorrow, and I'm going to try this, or I'm going to contact that person. And I think we're such social creatures that finding a group like that is really, really important. But remember, the other thing I like to say a lot, if I can just add this, that we don't have to be optimists at this point on this planet. Optimism maybe is a far stretch, but all humans need, I believe, is to sense that their acts can possibly make a difference. We don't need certainty. And so I call myself a possibilist instead of an optimist. I think it is possible that this critical moment, when so many people are waking up to the dire planetary challenge, as well as the very, very human day-to-day suffering, that we can't know what's possible. And so that is just very freeing to me, and to know that that I don't have to be an optimist is just really encouraging.
Right. So maybe we're kind of running out of time, but I wonder, I mean, I know you said something was coming out, but is there a next book that you're working on, or do you want to just tell us about the one that's kind of soon to appear, or?
Yeah, what I'm excited about now is this idea that we have to get real to heal, as I sometimes put it, but the idea that it's really helpful to see exactly where we stand on a range of issues. So we're publishing a report, and all of you, our website is smallplanet.org, and it will be posted there in the next week or so. It's just called Tough Truths for a Better Future, Better Tomorrow, I guess is what we say. And so it just goes through where we rank on a number of international rankings, and then in each category, who's doing the best. So we can then look into that and see what's happening. And so what my goal is, and I want to write my next book and call it Democracy's Calling. And with the double entendre of democracy is a calling, that is the human need to meet our needs for power, meaning, and connection. So it's our calling us, and then it is a calling, and it is calling us because of the dire state of the planet, but that it's calling us forward to learn about how to do better. So that's my goal. And I'd love any of you to look at this. As I say, in the next probably week, will be up there, Tough Truths for a Better Tomorrow, and give me your ideas, and especially ideas about how this might be incorporated into then the positive lessons from which countries are doing the best. And any comments and criticisms about what you heard tonight would also be very, very helpful.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I want to thank Frances Moore Lappé for sharing her thoughts about food, democracy, and the future of the planet. We at the CUNY Graduate Center are delighted to have had this opportunity to talk. It's great to see you once again. And it's so nice to have had a chance to do this. And I want to thank you so much.
My great honor. I just couldn't be more pleased to be reconnected to you, John.
Absolutely.
You out there. Thank you.
Yes. Well, we'll be in touch. And thanks again for doing this.
Great.
We'll talk.